Hello, what is up? Thank you for tuning in. This is Tom Froming, aka TF Twins. It is a Wednesday evening. That means we're talking baseball. We're still in lockout mode. It's all good. We still got some baseball to talk. Uh, this evening, we are going to be discussing the FanGraphs top 100 prospect list that just dropped. Prospect list dropping. That kind of feels like we're early spring training mode. Most of the other lists have dropped, so it was kind of interesting to see this one come out. Unfortunately, the FanGraphs team list for the Twins hasn't come out yet, so we don't have that list for the Twins system yet. But we do have this top 100 that came out, so we're going to dig into that right away here. All right, just going to let that eat up my screen here. You don't need to be looking at me for this. So as you can see, it's a bit of a different crew this year with Eric Longenhagen, Kevin Goldstein, and Tess Taruskin. Sorry if I butchered that one. But it's a different bit of a mix here with the analysts at FanGraphs this season than they've had before. Kylie McDaniel, who we'll talk about a little bit later, he moved on to ESPN at some point. I think that was within the last year. It all blends together at this point. But beside the point, the thing that is nice is this is a group list, so I do tend to like these a little bit better than the solo. Like I mentioned, ESPN's top prospect list is just Kylie McDaniel, as far as I know, and the Athletic, Keith Law is the only input on that list, which is fine. But I do prefer these ones that have at least a few inputs. Places like Baseball Prospectus, Baseball America, they always have a lot. But again, tonight we're just going to dig right into this. Not a whole lot of dilly-dallying around. This is FanGraphs' top 100 prospect list. A lot of familiar names at the top, as you would expect. If you are a kind of a prospect hound, somebody that pays real close attention to this kind of stuff. And I thought it was interesting the way they have the Twins ranked on here, and encouraging, to be honest with you. That was the biggest thing here. And you might say, what are you talking about, Tom? We have to keep scrolling this far to find a Twin, and you're encouraged by the results of this list. Yes, I am, honestly. As you can see, we're still scrolling past the 50 mark before we get to a Minnesota Twin, and that is their top prospect they have on this top 100 list is Austin Martin. Who I think it's interesting. They have him listed as a center fielder. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. If you've been paying attention to a lot of my analysis on the system, I don't think he's a shortstop. Why are we going to call him a shortstop then? I can't find anybody that thinks he's a shortstop. But Martin at 56 here, we're going to get into kind of where this fits in as far as other top 100 prospect lists. But that feels, about right to me. But here's where things get kind of encouraging is we don't have to go very far to find a Minnesota Twin. And it's Royce Lewis. FanGraphs has Royce Lewis 62nd on their top 100 list. We're seeing quite a few places drop Royce from their top 100 altogether, which, it's hard to really kind of throw too much of a stink about that. Royce has missed basically 2 full seasons now. So you can see, where you would imagine there are, other players around the league that are going to leapfrog him. But the kind of the stance that I took was like, I don't want to penalize this guy. There are things that he could be doing developmentally wise, without playing. Him just physically maturing 2 years is a big deal. Just getting bigger, stronger, growing into more of his man bod, as opposed to the teenage boy that we saw basically last on the field. That's a lot of physical development time that's been going on from, you see on the list here, he's age 22.7 right now. So you think he was 20 at the time 2 years ago when these lists were coming out. So it's not like he's been completely static. Obviously, he's lost a ton of development in his baseball skills-wise and things like that from missing this time. But I think in their write-up, they basically painted it as, this guy has some of the best all-around tools, raw tools, as anybody on the entire list. So if you think about it from that perspective, it is hard to keep him down too low. So that was really exciting for me to see Royce Lewis coming in at number 62. And again, we had Austin Martin up here at 56. And there's been a lot of these prospect lists that have, 2, maybe 3 twins. This one, we keep going. We got some more guys here. So that was, again, Royce at 62. Austin Martin was at 56. And if we scroll down a bit farther, we see Jose Miranda at number 85. And interesting, too, they have him listed as a second baseman. He primarily played third base last year. He's played a little bit of first base as well. Very briefly played the outfield. I think that's something they're going to experiment with more going forward. Kind of in hindsight, it really feels like maybe they should have been working on that previously. But anyway, Jose Miranda coming in at number 85. He's not a guy who's been a consensus top 100 prospect either. Mentioned Royce Lewis falling off some lists, of course, being the former number 1 overall pick, Lewis. He was always a pretty highly regarded prospect. So a little shocking to see him fall off some lists. Jose Miranda not cracking some lists surprised me. That's not going to surprise any of you who pay attention to my analysis, because I have him as the number 1 prospect in the twin system. So I'm encouraged to see, even though they don't agree with that particular assessment, which is fine with me. I'm willing to be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong sometimes. That's just the way it's going to work out. But seeing him in the top 100, that's great. Again, because not everybody has him as a top 100 prospect. He's not a consensus top 100. Speaking of that, this is where things get, I think, really exciting and interesting and intriguing. At number 88 is Josh Winder. Speaking of not, guys who are not in all the lists, I think this is the only top 100 I can find that Josh Winder is in. And you know what? To some degree, I get it. Again, Josh Winder is a guy who I am lower on than they are. They basically have him as their number 4 Twins prospect. And I don't have him that high because he's a little bit older. There was kind of a movement, during the lost season. There was a lot of impressive video that came out of his bullpens that really shot him up some people's list. I was a little bit slow to do that. And then the fact that he ended last year hurt him quite a bit in terms of kind of how far I felt like I could push him. But again, my last list I did was in October. So I think sometime before the start of the season, I'll do another one. And I think I got to think really long and hard about moving Josh Winder up, because it's like, what? It's hard to it's sort of like, if I'm to be buying into Jose Miranda so much because of his on-field performance, and not worrying so much about maybe some of the ceiling, or not worrying so much about his lack of a track record previous to that, I think I got to do the same thing with Josh Winder. And, this is a guy, it's not like he is doing it with, smoke and mirrors or whatever. The guy tops out at 97. He more sits around 94, 95, but I've definitely seen, I think in the futures game, which is probably the most legit radar gun, on a big league mound. Well, it's not even radar gun anymore, but you know what I mean? So that's a legit reading. Some of these might, especially like the Saints gun is like 2 or 3 miles per hour hot in St. Paul, which makes it fun to watch, but not exactly legit. So you don't always know how, accurate some of these readings are, but that one definitely was. So this guy throws hard. He's got excellent command. He had less than 2 walks per 9 last year. Control and command are really great. So I think I've got to move him up. But exciting to see that FanGraphs considers him the 88th best prospect in baseball. At 25, almost 25 and a half than most of the prospects on here. So I think a lot of people think it's hard to sort of project much more out of him. But he was excellent. He's excellent, especially in AA. In AAA, he got beat up a little bit more. And then unfortunately, we probably would have seen him with the Twins last year, had he not been injured. So that was exciting. And wait a minute, pump the brakes. Josh Winder is their number 1 pitching prospect. That's very unique. I don't know if I've seen that anywhere either, but he's not that far ahead. As you can see, Jordan Balazovic just a few spots behind him, essentially splitting hairs. You see the FV here is their future value, so they're both at a 50. But Winder's at 88, Balazovic's at 91. So that gives the Twins 5 prospects Austin Martin, Royce Lewis, Jose Miranda, Josh Winder, and Jordan Balazovic in the FanGraphs top 100 list. I believe that's as many as they have had in any of these lists this offseason. And, above average, of course. There's 30 teams. There's only 100 spots. So if you have 5 guys, you're doing better than most teams. So very encouraging to see this outlook from the FanGraphs staff. Again, this year, that's Eric Longenhagen, Kevin Goldstein, and Tess Taruskin. And so, since I fixed some new information on this, a new prospect list to take a look at, I'd kind of take a look through, and I encourage you to go check this out. There's write-ups on all these guys as well. Some very good information, so check that out over at FanGraphs. Let me jump over to this little spreadsheet that I threw together. And everybody watching live, we're going to get into the chat and discuss, and definitely be answering questions. Definitely talk amongst yourselves, too, before we get to that. But right now, actually, this logo is in my way. So let me get rid of that. There we go. So what you see here is I have, each one of these columns is one of the, big outlets that does a list: FanGraphs, Baseball America, Baseball Prospectus, The Athletic, and ESPN. I added a ESPN Plus subscription to my many streaming subscriptions so I could watch some college baseball. So they have theirs behind a paywall. So if you haven't heard anybody talking about that one or have seen that one, that might be why. But again, that's that's Kylie McDaniel. And then The Athletic, that would be Keith Law. So these are all the lists. These are where the guys are on the Twins on these prospect lists. It's sorted by where they were on the FanGraphs list. Just since we were talking about that one, I'd figured we'd sort of keep that one front and center. And it's color-coded to where the green is the highest any of these publications has these guys, and the red is the lowest. I realize I forgot to do Martin. But I think that was a reminder to myself that Martin is the only one of these guys who's considered a consensus top 100 prospect, which I found kind of interesting. It's interesting that the Twins have 6 guys who are showing up in these lists, yet only one of them, all the lists agree, are in the top 100. Now it's important to point out that you're really splitting hairs when you're trying to drill down to a top 100 of all of baseball. There's probably not a dramatic difference between your number 100 and your number 150. I'd have to imagine. I've never done anything like that. I don't follow the rest of the teams as closely, which is why I really like to look at these a lot and try to gain as much as I can out of these top 100 lists. And especially read those comments like we scrolled through a bit at FanGraphs. But I just found that particularly interesting that Martin is the one guy who's considered a consensus top 100 prospect. As you can see, Keith Law of The Athletic has him the highest at 25th. That kind of is a ranking that he was pretty common at last year. So he's kind of slipped a bit. And again, it's so competitive. You have to be so good to kind of stay at that level. It doesn't surprise me that Austin Martin, not having really the eye-popping numbers last year, that he would slide in a lot of lists. But he didn't drop Kylie McDaniel. I keep getting names mixed up here. But ESPN, we'll just stick with that. That's the lowest he's ranked, was 57. So a lot in that 45 to 60 range. And then, Royce Lewis, like I said, some publications completely left him off their top 100. Yet we're seeing FanGraphs had him at 62. ESPN had him at 56. They had him as the number 1 prospect, 1 spot above Austin Martin. Lewis Martin going back-to-back on that list. Very interesting. Again, I encourage you to go read that. There's good player comments in that one as well, but you do need an ESPN Plus subscription to read that one. Jose Miranda, again, the guy that I'm just completely head over heels about, shows up on everybody's but Baseball Prospectus. And he's, making the back end of lists. He's a big-time breakout prospect. I understand that a lot of his sort of prospecty value, he doesn't play a premium position. He's not a catcher or a shortstop or a center fielder. So that kind of hurts him. And then he's not a primo athlete. His speed isn't incredible. So that also kind of keeps him from being higher up on these lists. But his performance was just insane last year. and in AA and AAA. So he's at the highest levels of the minor leagues, just kicking everybody's ass, and not striking out either. That's the thing too. I don't know if you could say that he has like a tremendous approach or strike zone plate discipline. He does draw some walks, but he makes so much contact. He does not strike out. And I think the big difference was, getting out of the Florida State League for one. And then, maybe waiting for his pitch more rather than a pitch he can make contact with, because he can make contact with basically anything. The dude never strikes out. It's very impressive, the kind of power. He had 30 home runs last year. And not striking out these days with that kind of power, that really got me going. And again, against AA and AAA, the best pitching that he was able to be exposed to last year, just crushing it. So I'll talk your ear off about Jose Miranda. I'm very excited about him. And then again, I sorted this out by the FanGraphs ranking, but as you can see here, Josh Winder not showing up on any of the other top 100s. I don't think he showed up on any. I'm very confident he didn't show up on any of these at midseason or last year either. So this was the first time he popped on one. And again, surprising to see that he was ever so slightly, but above Jordan Balazovic as the Twins' number one pitching and Joe Ryan as the Twins' number one pitching prospect. Balazovic he didn't make was ESPN, so that's kind of interesting. And then again, Keith Law, who sort of overall had painted kind of a not super optimistic picture about the Twins system. But as you can see here, he's the high guy on Austin Martin and the high guy on Jordan Balazovic, which is sort of very consistent with the way he's been with about those two guys the last couple of years. You can see the other publications not too hot on Jordan Balazovic. And I'm kind of, I can see the upside, like if you look at his breakdown, just his stuff, his individual pitches. But if you look at his performance, it's easier to sort of feel a little bit more meh about him. Not quite, in the top 50 prospect range. Somebody who's definitely exciting, but I guess I'm kind of more in line with these rankings. And then the only other guy, I'm pretty sure, unless I missed somebody, which could be possible, but I believe the only guy that FanGraphs did not have in their top 100, who made another top 100, was Joe Ryan. So as you can see, not ranked for FanGraphs. He's also not ranked by The Athletic and ESPN. However, Baseball America had him at 86, and Baseball Prospectus had him at 96. Joe Ryan, how you feel about him is he's like the ultimate floor versus ceiling pitching prospect. I can't, that's as best as I can put it, because it is very difficult to imagine him really being a number one or number two pitcher, a top of the rotation guy. But at the same time, he's a legit 3-4, it looks like right now, without any more development, without anything else. It looks like it's completely appropriate to put him in as a 3-4 starter in the major leagues right now, and not be too concerned about it. I know some of the analysts are very concerned about how many home runs he's going to give up, which obviously could get him into a lot of trouble. And he's older as well. We talked about with Josh Winder. Joe Ryan's also older, so it's a little bit more difficult to project him to go any farther beyond what he is now. So I can see why, especially Balazovic, who again doesn't have the kind of performance, does not have, he has not reached above AA, but yet you can look at him and look at all his stuff and think if he gets a couple things going right and figures some things out, he could be a top of the rotation type guy potentially. So that is the kind of snapshot there. And I will bring in the chat and we'll kind of take a look at some other stuff here. Let's see. Yeah, I want to leave that up. All right. So trying something a bit different. We're just going to jump right into a topic like that today and then roll into the chat. I hope that was all right. I kind of missed the hellos. Thanks everybody for showing up. Edric, MSP Aviation, Gabriel, Shayla. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. And let's see here. Yeah, and I kind of alluded to this as I was talking about Keith Law. Nate mentions that Keith damning assessment of the Twins' organizational pitching depth. I talked about that on the channel recently, and basically he said that the Twins pitching pipeline pitching. I don't know if he specifically was asked about the prospects or if they were including just sort of the overall, young pitcher depth. So basically you would add Bailey Ober into that mix. But his response was essentially like the Twins are not above the median, which like that the Twins have to be. The Twins have to be better than most teams at their pitching pipeline right now. Because number one, there is very little pitching on the big league club as it is. And number two, yeah, you're right, Nate. Falvey was brought in to be a pitching guy. Definitely. I would say that's the kind of thing that we were sold, that, he's coming from Cleveland, a team that had been doing an unbelievably good job at uncovering sort of diamonds in the rough, Corey Kluber type guys, and getting really great value out of, middle round picks in the draft, out of college and things like that. So yeah. And we're 6 years in or whatever, and there's not much to show there. So, I'm taking that line of, it has to happen. Basically, we have to see more things popping up from that pitching pipeline this year. And if Keith is right, boy, I'm going to be pretty down on the front office. Colin is asking, would Joe Ryan count as a prospect because he spent some time? He did not hit. There are some publications do this a little bit differently, but most of them go by the rookie eligibility. I'm not sure exactly what that is off the top of my head, but I know that Joe Ryan did not pitch enough to exceed that rookie eligibility. So like he'll be eligible for the Rookie of the Year award next year, for example. I think most publications are going off that now, but I think some of them are not. I'm not sure. So, but I wouldn't be surprised. Joe Ryan's rankings on these it doesn't surprise me if he's not considered a top 100 prospect at this point. Let's see here. We're playing with fire. I'm jumping into something else here. I apologize if I pop off. So 22 minutes in is where we're going to play with fire on this stream. That's the other thing with sort of me jumping into a topic without having to sort of juggle things. All right. So I'm just checking Baseball Reference, because on Baseball Reference, there is a spot that will tell you their rookie status, and that does confirm that Joe Ryan's is still intact through 2022. Let me see if they don't explain that on here. I don't think. Oh, here we go. And even like service time. So it's not just your innings pitched or at bat. So it's 50 innings pitched is the threshold. It's 130 at bats for a hitter, and it's 45 days of service for anybody. And one of the Twins prospects, I wonder if it was Ben Rortvedt. One of them did not exceed like the playing time limit, but they did the service time one. So that'll happen sometimes. It's kind of tricky. But again, I like going to Baseball Reference and checking that. So it's 50 innings, and Joe Ryan only pitched 26 and 2/3 innings. So he is rookie eligible. I would imagine he was eligible for all of these. And look at that. Seth Stills just happens to know it, I'm sure, right off of his head. I think they changed those, though, within the last few years. Let me know if that sounds familiar, Seth. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it seems that like at one point I knew what they were, and then they changed them recently. I don't know. But yeah, so Joe Ryan is prospect eligible still. And Seth saying fun seeing Michael Busch. If Michael Busch is from Minnesota, so if that's a name that you weren't familiar with, that's why Seth brought him up. Daniel, hope Kirilloff has the breakout season this year. I might talk about him a little bit later, but that's another thing to keep in mind with the Twins. So as we're looking through this lens of just prospects and guys who are prospect eligible, is like Kirilloff isn't prospect eligible, but he's super young. Larnach isn't prospect eligible, but he's super young. Ober isn't prospect eligible, but he's relatively young. Ryan isn't prospect eligible anymore, but he's young. So the Twins have a ton of other encouraging young players in their organization beyond these guys who are technically prospect eligible, who we can be very excited about. So I think that's encouraging as well beyond these guys. And I just remember one thing I was going to bring up was it surprises me a bit that I don't believe Simeon Woods Richardson showed up on any of these lists. And I know he definitely wasn't a consensus top 100 prospect at this time a year ago, but I think he was, sort of like some of these guys that we have, like Joe Ryan, he'd popped up on a couple of them, maybe less than half, but he was on some of them. And it was interesting that nobody had him on their list this time around. He was like the youngest guy in AA last year. Simeon Woods Richardson we're talking about here. And then obviously his season was kind of weird because of the Olympics. So I'm not sure if any of those things kind of dinged him or what it was. Interesting. Daniel also brings up Oakland. Yeah, that's I think the primary team if you're kind of digging through rumors. Obviously, it's a little slow because of the lockout, but definitely that is the team everybody's talking about as potential trades. Nash Walker threw out an interesting trade idea involving Frankie Montas, which we might get to a little bit later, depending on how long we go tonight. Pardon me. Yeah, depending on how long we go, because I feel like I might lose voice tonight. Just swinging through here. Again, thanks for stopping by tonight. We talked about the FanGraphs top 100 prospect list in case you're joining us late. Went kind of through that. And so what you're seeing on the screen here is basically just a breakdown of all of these 5 major outlets prospect lists and where the Twins are landing on those. All right. And Drew is asking, when do you think Miranda will get called up? That's more than likely going to depend on injuries. If everyone is healthy, and I'm kind of also expecting the Twins to add some kind of an offensive talent. Maybe not, not anybody that's like a big, probably like a 1-year signing, somebody who's not particularly exciting, but another guy that they can put into the mix. But even right now, if they sign assuming they add a shortstop, which I think we can assume. I don't think they're going to move Polanco back to shortstop, which is what they would have to do if they don't sign a shortstop. So if they sign a shortstop, basically Luis Arraez is that 9th man. Maybe you wouldn't call him the DH because he would be playing in the infield quite a bit, I would imagine. And so Jose Miranda's kind of like his potential is to be sort of like the 10th man. Or if Brent Rooker is going to be on the team, like the 11th bat. So it's kind of like, I think they want him playing. And I think they have a pretty decent excuse to send him to AAA if they want to get more looks at him in the outfield potentially. Then it makes a ton of sense to send him to AAA. But before too long, he's going to be up. I would think, sometime in May, maybe. But again, it probably the way his path to the Twins is going to depend on an injury. So like, if Josh Donaldson doesn't make it out of spring training healthy, I would imagine Miranda's on the opening day roster. So, it's all going to come down to that. Again, we're in lockout mode still. I don't think that the February 28th deadline is BS. It's BS. They don't need a deal. There's no way that you're telling me that they can't. They get a deal done on March 3rd. You're telling me we can't get it. Can't get a 162 game season. We're going to let a couple days. No way. I think through next week, I think they can still get it done. I think that's a bargaining BS kind of thing. Now, are they going to get a deal done by then? I don't know. I've been saying this whole time, I'm not really going to sweat anything until March 1st. We're getting close. We're getting close. I still am not really, I think this is a lot of, posturing on both sides. The way these things seem to always work and, thinking about how things came together in 2020 is, On 1 minute, everybody on Twitter is freaking out that we're not going to have a season. And then all of a sudden the next minute there's an agreement. Like that's how quickly it's going to happen. Like it's going to sound like nothing's going to come together until it comes together. So that's why I'm trying, keyword trying, to keep it together, not get too worked up about anything. I'm not going to overreact if they don't have a deal on Monday. Cause again, I think it's BS. That deadline is not going to, that's not a hard, they're going to say that's a hard deadline. It's not a hard deadline. They can get things going much quicker than that if they need to. I think spring training was 3 weeks long in 2020, spring training 2.0. Obviously you need some time to get guys to the training sites or whatever. But I think somebody said in 1990 when there was labor stuff, like they started spring training on like March 15th and still had a 162 game season. I think opening day might have got kicked back, but they still managed to get 162 in. So I don't know. Again, I'm trying not to worry about that. And like when I'm looking ahead, my sort of main thought is on the minor league season, because that's happening. So I'm trying to sort of hold that tight. So if there's anything we want to say, especially about these 6 guys that we have up here, it's both sort of exciting and sort of unfortunate that 5 of these 6 guys are on the Twins 40-man roster. And, some of them are, potentially opening day guys. What does that mean? Why would I bring up that they're on the 40-man roster? Well, that means that they are in the union. So they are going to be in the lockout. Once the minor league season starts, anybody who's not on a 40-man roster, even if you haven't made your MLB debut, if you're on a 40-man roster, you're in the union, you're not going to be able to participate in the minor leagues. Austin Martin, since he was just drafted in 2020, it has not been added to the 40-man roster yet. It doesn't have to happen yet. So he will be playing. So, if you want something to get excited about, if you're feeling kind of down, just think of that. As long as he's healthy, we're going to be seeing Austin Martin playing in early April. We know that for sure. So, and a bunch of other, it's not just these guys that we can get excited about. Lots of other guys. So that's going to be, you'll see a lot of my focus. If the lockout continues, a lot of the focus on this channel is going to shift toward, hey, minor league season is coming up. Let's talk about these guys not on the 40-man roster who are in the system and interesting, and have some more time to discuss those guys. I think that could be a really fun discussion to have and to highlight some of these guys. It'll give me an excuse to talk about Jefferson Morales, who's like my favorite Twins prospect. But not yet. We're not going to do that quite yet. So nice of Seth to be here because he can give us these great tidbits. So Alex Hassan, I think that's how he pronounces it. Seth will have to, I'm sure he knows for sure. Who's one of the main developmental guy for the Twins, spoke glowingly of Simeon Woods Richardson in a press conference. I think just you can how teams treat guys too. The fact that the Blue Jays have pushed him so hard and put him straight to Double-A, and you could say the same thing about Austin Martin too, which Austin Martin is a little bit older than Simeon Woods Richardson, but this was his very first professional season, and Toronto sent him straight to Double-A. Like, I get talent-wise that makes sense, but you're really putting some pressure on these guys. These are really good players. Like Double-A, I actually would argue that there's more talent in Double-A than there is Triple-A. There's more skill in Triple-A than there is in Double-A, is the argument that I would make. There's a lot more refinement of the guys in Triple-A than in Double-A. But just skill, raw talent, there's more of that in Double-A than Triple-A, in my opinion at least. So to send Austin Martin there straight out of college, just basically, and to send Simeon Woods Richardson there as a 20-year-old, that tells you, I think, a lot about, what they think of those guys, the youth getting back in the strike zone, like how those guys can handle stuff. Yeah. And like, gosh, Woods Richardson, you think like that's how his year started, being basically the youngest guy in Double-A. Then he goes to the Olympics. He doesn't pitch in a competitive game, which had been a letdown, but I'm sure he made the most of his time there. I'm sure he picked up some stuff. I'm sure it was a good experience. And he's traded. So after that, he's got to go and get accustomed to a new team. Just a crazy whirlwind of a weird year for him. But I'm almost positive that he ended the year healthy, which is like a huge bonus for him that you can't say exactly about a lot of the other pitching prospects in the system, like Josh Winder, unfortunately, like Yohan Duran, who's the guy we didn't mention too, who didn't show up on any of these lists either. He threw less than 20 innings, I think. So, it's hard to pop into a top 100 when that's the case. Yeah, I think, and especially since Woods Richardson hasn't been around in the system. And then, of course, he wasn't in Toronto that long. They traded for him from the Mets. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering that right. And I feel like, as guys kind of come up and come through you, if you've known them and been getting more accustomed to them over multiple years, I think there's maybe more excitement that builds up in a fan base. And since he's sort of moved around a little bit and, of course, new to the Twins, he didn't pitch all that well after the trade either. But he certainly showed some flashes. I had shared a highlight of him striking out Julio Rodriguez, who's like the Mariners prospect, who's a consensus top 5 prospect in all of baseball. So yeah, I really like Woods Richardson, but he's not a guy that we're going to see anytime super soon. He's very young, so that's another thing too, where maybe there's not quite as much excitement. But I really like him. Daniel, is Nelson Cruz still a free agent? He is still a free agent, and now it's going to be interesting because as Casey throws in here, or KV boy. The universal DH agreement make our chances of getting Cruz back super low. I don't know that they're super low, but remember, Nelson Cruz, as amazing as he was with the Twins before the trade, he was bad. He was not very good with Tampa Bay. So I don't know what his market's going to look like. There's not going to be teams falling over themselves to try to get Nelson Cruz. I don't think. His age obviously is a concern. And any sign of him falling off is going to be, they're going to hang on that. And it's going to definitely impact his market. So I don't know. It all depends on if the Twins are interested again to have a set DH. Some teams don't like that. I don't get the sense that the Twins ever really loved that. Given that it took them, he was out on the free agent market for a long time last winter, I feel like. And part of that was him kind of hanging out to see if there was going to be a universal DH. So yeah, there's definitely going to be more teams that are interested, clearly, if the NL has the DH. But a lot of the NL teams do have kind of a ninth bat that was sort of hanging, like you think about like the Mets. They definitely have extra bats. There's teams, San Francisco has, you don't necessarily think of like a bat, but they have a lot of guys on that team that were above league average hitters. That you could see where them just having a rotation would make a lot of sense. Some teams just also had like bad defensive players, that they were just dying to put at DH essentially. Steven, what would you think of Story for something like 490? I mean, I would do that. Because my whole thing is like, you're not blocking anyone, in my opinion. Because, as we saw, FanGraphs did not list Austin Martin as a shortstop. Royce Lewis, there are certainly concerns about him being a shortstop. I am still a believer that he can do it. But Keith Law just totally said he's not a shortstop. And, that might be the case. That's one of the easiest things to say about a prospect. Number one is I think he's a bullpen guy, because hardly any starters actually make it as starters in the major. And number two is probably, he's not a shortstop, because there's so many guys that start their minor league careers out at shortstop, and they don't even get through the minors as shortstops, let alone to the majors. So I don't think we can just assume that the Twins have a long-term shortstop in-house. You know, and if we're looking for the next guys after that, it's like Keone Cavaco, who you can't bank on for anything. You know, or you know, there's not a whole lot of other names. So yeah, I think putting Trevor Story in at shortstop long term would make a lot of sense. His numbers from last year aren't incredible. Obviously, moving from Coors Field is always a concern, but there's also the Coors hangover, which and I'm not talking about like when you drink a case of Coors and then you have a hangover the next day. It's actually a thing. You can look up. There's lots of articles out there on it about how, you know, coming out of like a homestand at Coors Field and then going to a new stadium, pitches actually like look and perform differently at Coors Field than they do elsewhere. So it's not only just moving from a great hitter's park and then going on the road to more of a pitcher's park. It's in addition to that, you have an adjustment to make in terms of just how pitches are moving and looking. So you can't just say, oh, these are his road numbers. This is what we would think he would hit at Target Field. Basically is what I'm trying to say there. But again, the Coors Field hangover. Now don't Google Coors hangover. I don't know what you're going to get if you do that. So Coors Field hangover is what you want to look up. Drew calling it right now. Carlos Rodon coming to Minnesota, the best we have. So much cash just laying around. I mean, yeah, if you look at their projected opening day salary from last year and their projected opening day salary right now, I think we figured it was like a $40 million difference. And there's not that many guys. I mean, there's a lot of bats. There's some good-looking bats out there that are available still in the free agent market. But in terms of pitching, you know, the best guys are Rodon and Clayton Kershaw. And there are some other guys that are attractive. You know, I've been talking about Yusei Kikuchi quite a bit. You know, Michael Pineda is a natural guy that comes up quite a bit. But those guys aren't going to be significant investments anyway. So, yeah, why not? Why not take a run at Rodon? I think, you know, they made him a minor league offer last year, apparently. So I'm down. And Colton, you know, again, I'm kind of catching up here. It wasn't too long ago when Yohan Duran was on these top 100 lists. Yeah, for sure. I looked it up. I was looking for some video I had on him. And actually, a year before the Twins traded for Duran, I was tweeting about how, you know, there's this 19-year-old guy who sounds interesting with Arizona, but I doubt he'd be available. I don't know in what context. I don't know if maybe there was a rumored Twins Diamondbacks deal that didn't go down that year, but yeah, I've been into him for a while, but unfortunately, you know, didn't throw much last year. And I'm kind of worried though that he's kind of going to now be on that Brusdar Graterol track of like, you know, you're on the 40-man roster now. It's kind of time to sort of start gearing you to a major league asset instead of like building up your innings, things like that. And, you know, the Twins are going to need all the pitching that they can get on both the rotation and the bullpen, it seems. And it just seems like it's going to be not only, you know, it just, I'm sounding kind of dejected about that because it does bum me out because I want to see if this guy can do it as a starter. Same with Graterol. I was bummed out before they traded him. They announced that, yeah, this guy's a reliever now. And I was like super bummed about that. But it's like you can dream on that though, man, of just taking Duran and sticking him into the bullpen. Now you could pretty much put him in the Twins bullpen, you know, after maybe like, you know, since he didn't pitch at the end of last year, let him gear up, let him adjust to, you know, pitching in short spurts, and then just letting him loose. I'm kind of thinking that could be what they do, but we'll see. Again, I would prefer to keep him in the rotation, at least for now. But again, he threw so few innings that this is basically kind of just a throwaway year if you're going to keep him in the rotation. It's all about stretching him out and keeping him healthy is what it would be. And I just don't know at this point, you know, if they're going to want to do that. We'll see. Yeah, and, you know, MSP Aviation throws out, wants to go to spring training. You know, I definitely feel for anybody that makes that a annual thing, or they were excited to go, or, I saw some people on Twitter saying they had like bachelor parties planned and stuff like that. My heart goes out to anybody who, you know, uh, attends or was planning to for the first time this year, or anything like that. It sucks. I wish, that wasn't happening. There is technically no reason why there has to be a lockout right now. But again, I don't really want to get into this stuff. It's just going to be me bitching we'll go on for hours if you get me going. So maybe we'll do that next week. But again, I've been delaying that as long as I can. Just trying to chill off on that a little bit. I think we're all frustrated because it's even like, we're frustrated that the lockout's happening, but it's like I'm also frustrated that like I can't get as excited about baseball as I want to. Now, how ridiculous is that? You're preventing people that want to get excited about baseball in February from getting excited about Major League Baseball in February. I don't know. Like I said, I got that ESPN Plus thing so I could watch some college baseball. I'm going to be watching minor league baseball like crazy, of course, once that kicks up. So we'll have to find our fixes elsewhere for now, but we'll see. Oh, okay. We got to talk a little bit more. Yeah. Yes. Jefferson Morales. He's like 5'3". He catches and plays some outfield. He's got a massive leg kick. He has like a hilarious pre-pitch setup that he does in the box where he's like wielding his bat around like a sword. And he's a hell of a hitter. He's got power for a guy of his size. I just love watching him play. So yeah, prepare for some more Jefferson Morales talk if we're going to get into that. What will the bullpen look like this year? I'm actually not too concerned about the bullpen. Trevor Rogers' health is a question because he had that finger injury, but it kind of sounded like he was going to expected to have a regular offseason. And he's just so good, it's hard to imagine him kind of falling off to any kind of great degree. Tyler Duffy's still around. He's a very nice setup man. I think this front office has done a pretty good job at finding, if you can give them credit for anything, they're pretty good at finding unheralded bullpen guys. Caleb Thielbar was a beast last year. And they didn't start out with a great bullpen, but by the end of the year, the Twins bullpen was pretty solid. And I threw Duran into the mix as like a potential X factor. Jorge Alcala, I did a video on him and how well he ended the season and the adjustments that he made that make you feel like it's a significant and real change for him. So that's exciting. Another X factor guy who kind of falls into that Duran conversation of, you're getting kind of a little bit older. You are on the 40-man roster. Drew Strotman. I think Drew Strotman, who last year he didn't pitch great and he was worse after being traded to the Twins from Tampa Bay. He came over in that Joe Ryan trade. But this was his first year back from Tommy John this past season. And he's got a rocket for an arm. He throws in the upper 90s. So he's another guy where it could be like, well, we do need starting pitching depth, but, boom, easy button. Let's just put you in a bullpen, and let's turn you loose there and see what happens. And all of a sudden you have a guy potentially in Drew Strotman from going from, kind of a middling starting pitching prospect. Let's be honest. He's not a guy who's cracking top 100 lists or anything. And he could go from that to a impact bullpen guy potentially. Again, they say that your command velo actually comes back like basically right away after Tommy John is what kind of the common thought is with Tommy John is that your velocity actually comes back pretty quick. It's more your feel and your command that may take a full season to come back. So that's another reason to potentially be encouraged about Strotman as well in whatever role that they put him in. But he's a guy who when I'm thinking about bullpen upside that I kind of look at and I'm like, oh yeah, that could be something. All right. And I think we're going to call it there again. Thank you for stopping by. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a like. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. Let me know if you what you thought about this a little bit different vibe tonight with Just starting off by getting right into a topic and then kind of kicking it back. I feel it feels a little weird, a little, but I think that's going to help replay value a lot. People who are coming back and watching this not live, watching it as an on-demand video, a little bit better for those, better experience for those folks. So, and I know not everybody's in here right away either. So the numbers definitely climb as we get into a little bit. So, but I still, if you came in and said hi early and felt a little dissed, I didn't say hi, I apologize, but let me know about that format. Again, thanks for stopping by. We're going to do this again next Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. And maybe I'll just blow my lid about the lockout finally. I don't know. Bring earplugs next week, maybe. I don't know. Again, we'll talk again soon.